All right. What is up? Welcome back to Worship Leader Q&A Live with Kingdom Calibrate. I'm excited to be here today. I brought back my friend Tyler. Welcome, Tyler.
What's up?
Oh, not much, man. That was a quick fade out of that music. I was hoping that would take longer and be a little smoother.
I was enjoying it.
Our conversation right before you jumped on was, what was it? Tell me. It was, I want to match my head size to your head size.
Yeah. Weird things you talk about before you do a stream.
That's true. Weird things in the virtual studio. That's not a real studio.
My head will never match your head size.
That is absolutely accurate. So on that note, welcome. Hey, so I wanted to bring you back on because we had the echo weird thing last week, and hopefully that's not there this week. I didn't hear it last week, but I don't hear it right now either. So far, so good.
Let us know in the chat.
Yes. So a couple quick things. Hopefully, if you are watching or if you're stumbling on this maybe later, feel free to throw any questions you have in the chat. We've already got a lot to talk about. And today we're hitting 3 different topics. We are hitting burnout, team health, and recruiting. Okay, burnout, team health, and recruiting. So these are 3 things that I think affect pretty much every church once you start trying to figure out how to rotate teams of volunteers together. So all these are a little bit connected. So we're just going to talk about teams and team health today. So we already had one question come in before the podcast started. So I'm going to throw that up on the screen, and this is where we are going to begin. So our anonymous question from a guest. Would you say the heart of burnout in the church stems from a lack of volunteers? So Ty, I'm throwing it to you first.
A lack of volunteers. Burnout is such a complicated issue, and it's so personal. What burns me out is probably a lot different than what burns you out, and what burns out the person asking this question, what burns out my volunteers. And so I don't know if I'd say that the heart of burnout is a lack of volunteers, although that can contribute. But as a leader, we're thinking about my team. I think it takes being really intentionally connected with each team member to know maybe what causes them to get burnout, or even if they're close to burnout. And what can I do to help fight that with them? And I think it's a lot more personal than just a systemic, church-wide thing. Although there's a lot of things you can do as a church and as a ministry to help your volunteers not get burned out.
Yeah. So what do you think those things are? So what are things that we can do? And then I'll kind of throw in my 2 cents here in a minute. It's like, what are things that you do with your team that helps prevent burnout, or just things that, keep you aware of burnout?
Sure. I have had, at the same time, a handful of volunteers that they will give all of their time to the church, right? It seems like these people are immune from burnout. They'll give work hours, they'll stay late, they'll show up early. Something in these people never gets burnt out. And something in my other group of volunteers seems like, sometimes they only can commit for a month and then they're off the ministry altogether, or, whatever. I think first thing is systematically, we've got to make avenues for us to get to know each team member. Beyond that, I think one of the things we do is cast vision a lot. At least one of the things I'm trying to do more is really connect a why to what we're doing, so that even when we work really hard, even for those team members who maybe it feels more like work to them and less like, enjoyable service, they know that what they're doing is really connected to kingdom impact. It's really connected to the vision of our church. It's connected to results that we can celebrate together. And hopefully that casting a lot more vision about the why can curb some of that burnout, because then they're willing to work hard for God's kingdom and for what God's doing, That's one thought. There's other things we do systemically to maybe fight that, like doing team things outside the church, just getting out offsite, having fun together, doing stuff over meals.
Yeah.
I think all those things help. There's a million things we could do.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you said that, because, a lot of times we assume that burnout comes from asking too much of people, right? And I've found a lot of times with a lot of people, and you're right, it's personality driven to some degree, but there's a lot of people that get burnt out without a whole lot of ask.
Yeah.
Right. some people that, like you said, never get burnt out no matter how much you throw on them. So, I have this habit with myself that I've tried to get out of the last couple of years, especially where it's like I really want to protect people on my team, so I want to say no for them. So, what do I mean by
Mm.
that? Say no for them. If I think that it's a lot, if it sounds like a lot to me, or even if I'm feeling burnt out in my ministry, I'll start saying no for people because I think to myself, oh, I couldn't possibly ask them to do that because they're already doing this, and I don't want to bring them here another night of the week. But I found from leaving one ministry where I'd say we had a pretty high standard for what it looked like to serve. One of the ministries I was at, the service on the worship team was about a 14-hour a week commitment.
Yeah.
It was a Wednesday night. It was a service on Wednesday. It was a practice on Wednesday. It was a service on Saturday, another practice on Saturday, and then 2 services on Sunday. That's what it looked like to serve for one weekend.
Wow.
And, I probably experienced less people leave the ministry from burnout there than any other place I've been. And that was really surprising to me because my assumption is that burnout happens from over asking people. But I think
Mhm.
the difference was burnout there we didn't see a lot of it because there was a lot of culture and a lot of vision behind what we were doing, and people were highly bought in when they knew what we were asking. They knew where we were trying to go together, and because we desperately needed volunteers in pretty much every position in the church to run the church, people had a really high ownership, and I
Yeah.
think it was the ownership that contributed to not feeling burnt out. So like if I was micromanaging everything on the team, then I would see a lot more burnout. If I'm giving people authority and, kind of what we say, giving them the keys to the Corvette in the garage and trusting them with it. I've never had a Corvette, love one. I don't fit in one. But if I gave, I want to give them the keys to the ministry and say, hey, I'm going to train you up as a worship leader. I'm going to train you up as somebody who really has high ownership in our ministry. And when you have high ownership, you don't get burned out quite as much. Now, we have to go back and ask the question of what is it within our systems that cause burnout. And, I think one of the things that does cause burnout in our systems is if we only have one person who can do a certain role. So like
Yeah.
depth becomes a huge thing, right? I always want to make sure we're at least a couple people deep and preferably 3 or 4 people deep in every position so that we do have some healthy rotation. And then, your people that aren't prone to burnout, you can put them in charge and say, hey, here's your team around you. I want you to lead this team of, 3 other people. And you guys kind of
Mhm.
lead this section together. So maybe it's a bass player. It's like, hey, there's 3 other bass players. I want you to kind of, take ownership of this and talk with them and do your own little workshops with them, things like that. Same thing on tech teams. It's like, hey, we might have a lead production person, but it's your job to train up these other people around you. So, you can try to create this high level of ownership with a decent degree of depth. And to me, that's kind of the recipe for not getting burnt out in the ministry. So thoughts?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
No, that's great. One of the things that has been really fun to watch on my team is, the people who are there, that they're bought in, they have grasped the vision, and the people who do want to serve. I also am prone to say no for them, to use your words,
Mhm.
or to hold back and maybe say, well, we'll do this new thing when we find some new people to do it. Or maybe if I could just find one key volunteer to do this, then I won't have burnout in this position. But what I found is the people who are already bought in, if you just say, hey, what would it look like for you you're already doing these 2 roles. What about, you want to try a camera out? Do you want to try to learn a different instrument? And cross-training people, usually they jump at the opportunity to do that. I think I shared last week, like I just had a drummer, it's been one of our drummers for 10 years, say, hey, I want to learn guitar. And he just killed it on his first Sunday playing guitar. So like, we just added a new team member without adding a new team member. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's huge. Like that kind of goes a little bit into our next topic of, team health. What does team health look like? Um, let me think about a good way to word this. I think that, team health to me is when you have people who are all serving with a heart of service behind it. And what I mean with a heart of service is it doesn't matter what position they're in. They're not asking, hey, can I be scheduled? Or, hey, can I be a singer next week? Or, hey, can I be on stage next week? What they start asking is, hey, how can I serve? And that's my
Yeah.
favorite question in the world. And it's my own favorite question for how I run my ministry is, hey, how can I serve? Because if I'm not willing to get down and, do the most basic thing that's not very glorious, right, then I can't expect anybody else to do that. But like we had a problem where we had a lot of people, more people than we had, technology to support on a given weekend, right? So the
Mm,
question then became, hey, how can I serve? Is there something else I can do? And it's like, yes, you can run a camera, like you just said. You can, maybe start learning this other instrument if you really want to and you're highly musical. Hey, let's
yeah.
start learning acoustic guitar. Let's start learning, maybe some keyboards or something like that. Or let's just learn how to do a broadcasting role, because people that are really good at music tend to be really good at like calling camera shots because they know what's happening in the middle of a song. And
Right.
not every church has a broadcast room or anything like that, but figure out how you can use creative people in a lot of other areas that don't rely too heavily on technology. Most of the stuff we've got, pretty much turnkey at this point. But if you've got somebody with a good musical ear and knows what's happening throughout the worship moments in the service, they're probably going to kill it, like you said.
Yeah. I love that. I think, especially if you've got that culture of service that's starting to grow within your team and they're seeing you demonstrate it. I say sometimes on my team, like, no one's above cleaning a toilet. That means me. Like, if the
Yeah.
toilet needs cleaned, I'll do it, because it's not about me. It's not about being upfront. And if that's starting to grow on your team, that can be a really fun place, because then you can start to dream with people about, what are your unique strengths that you bring to our team that maybe we don't even have a position for. Maybe you're really gifted in hospitality. There's no worship team role for hospitality on a Sunday morning, right? But if we dream a little and you have a heart to serve, what would it look like for you to plan some fun events for our team? All of a sudden, you have fresh life in you in the context of our church and serving God, because you're getting to do something out of an overflow of where you're gifted and what God's called you to do beyond this really narrow set of responsibilities that churches typically have for volunteers. But you can't really do that until that culture of I'll serve wherever, I've got open hands, starts to circulate on your team.
Yeah. And I want to hit back on that. So, like, I think you said, hey, maybe there's not a spot for hospitality on a Sunday morning. I'm going to say, man, if we're creative, I think there could be. So, like,
Yeah.
we created a position called hospitality for Sunday morning. And the really the only thing was, I want somebody who can come in, who can kind of get the packs out of the closet, get them all batteried up, have everything ready to go. And then they started bringing in breakfast for the team. And it was like, hey, how can the question became, how can I serve the team that's serving early? And maybe that's tied
Yeah.
to childcare of like, hey, I know somebody's got 2 small kids and they're coming in. And aside from letting their kids just run all around in the sanctuary or something, it's like,
Right.
hey, how can I serve them? Just serve these families. And it ended up being an awesome position because we converted that position over time into being able to walk with people as we onboarded new people to the team. And that kind of
Mm.
became like their buddy. So we did a little bit of a buddy system. Who's the person who teaches you, hey, here's how to run this little mixing unit for your in-ears or something like that. Or here's
Mhm.
the door we come in. Here's where we park when we get to church. There's all these weird little things that you take for granted after you've done it for a while that somebody brand new to the
Wow.
team has no idea about, or especially if they're brand new to the church. They just don't know any of the stuff that we know, and we forget that we know it. All right.
Yeah.
So like I love that position of just somebody to look around and say, how can I make people feel more at home while they're here? And maybe that's, bringing a meal on Sunday mornings, bringing donuts, just finding ways to serve, because it all goes back to the heart of service, which is amazing.
Yeah. I think the key to like starting to see some of those things flourish on your team is, I'm sure I stole this from someone, but it's the
Mhm.
I see in you. So starting to use that phrase, hey, this is what I see in you, to your volunteers. I see a heart of service in you. I see a really energetic, I see an encourager in you. And starting to call those things out, that we don't usually say things like that very often. But what it does for someone on a team, especially as a volunteer, is, wow, I feel valued. I feel like I've got something to contribute beyond, just playing an instrument, which is a great thing to contribute. But if you can help them to see, like, no, you're an integral member of our team culture, that really starts to build that and build momentum on your team.
Yeah. Love that. Elliot just threw a message on here, says we're doing a fun event called a Family Feud Night and inviting the family to be the live studio audience. Oh man, have you guys ever done that?
No, that's really creative. That sounds
I mean, I
awesome.
love that. Like I'm thinking of ideas of when we're talking about team health and say we do these get-togethers once a year where we just do like this, team appreciation, which I love the idea of. Like once a year we come together as a worship team and we just do a fun event.
Yeah.
And I like this idea. This Family Feud Night thing goes right in with that, inviting the family to be the live studio audience. Like anything you can do to help make your team feel more like a cohesive family. And
Yeah.
I think we were talking a couple weeks ago about the differences between what's it like to be in a life group versus what is it to kind of make your worship team one of your small group ministries. And, anything we can do just to get people outside the church walls or even in the church walls that just doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like you're going over songs and hashing out parts. Is huge for a team and just creating that family dynamic. And also I'd say prevents burnout over time because then they feel like we're part of something bigger and we're part of this cohesive family unit together.
Totally. Elliot, I love that idea. This is one of the funny things. We're trying to really move forward with some of these concepts on our team. And this is where I'm actually weak. Like I don't have a strength in coming up with fun, creative events. And I'm trying to encourage people on my team to take over some of that stuff instead of me doing all the leading. Hey, you're gifted in making fun events. Have at it. The only fun event idea I've ever had, which I don't even know how we'd implement this, but is doing I know you're familiar with The Office, but doing a version of the Dundies Awards every year. That's my grand idea is, someone does something hilarious on a Sunday morning. Let's clip that from the live stream and give them a Dundie for it at the end of the year. I don't know what we'd call it, but
I love hilarious. Okay. Real quick. What is the funniest thing that's ever happened to you on a Sunday morning? And I'll give you two. I've got two that are both.
All right, you go first.
I don't want to go first. I said, I've got two. That's why I'm giving it to you first.
Well, give me one, then I'll give you one. Then you can do another one.
Okay. All right. One, there was a moment, this is probably the strangest experience I had as a worship leader. And there's still pictures of it out there somewhere. It's amazing. Which was, I know you have. It's in the middle of a song, a little dog walked out on the stage.
Yes.
And and it was right in the middle. I still remember the song. The song was Great I Am. And this was, a number of years back. So that song was still a banger at that point. I mean, it still is in my head. But we were right in the power part of the song where we start doing, the mountain shake before him, the demons run and flee. And we're like the band's pumping. And all of a sudden, this little white dog just starts walking off the stage.
Yes.
And I did not expect to see that at any point leading worship in my entire life. And I had no idea what to say. So I didn't say anything, but they froze it on the live stream and created a nice little meme out of that. Or I think my head is just giving one of these looks of,
yep.
And that was all I could do. Awesome. I had it's like you either stop and call attention to it or you keep going, which is a worship leader, part of your worship leader tricks toolbox, which is when something happens, you've got two options. You either stop everything and call attention to it and laugh it off so that you can reset the mood, or you pretend like nothing's even happened. So that's one.
I don't know about funny things. I mean, I feel like everything that has gone wrong can go wrong for me. I've butchered the lyrics of a song to where they sounded like something you shouldn't say in church. I've broken 3 strings in a service all at different times, like one string a song. That was a fun service. Nothing hilarious though. I don't know.
Listen, if you do it, when you do it long enough, things are just going to happen. Right?
You could probably ask my team and they could tell you a few things.
Yeah. If somebody's on your team and you guys are watching, man, I would really love to see in the chat and something that is embarrassing about you. That just makes me feel better about myself.
I told my team they're not allowed to watch this.
Too bad. I'll give you my most embarrassing one. You ready for it? I totally led a whole service with my fly down one time without realizing it.
I'm sure I have too.
Yeah, it happens. Listen, that's worship leadership 101 right there. Is you can't take yourself very seriously because something's going to happen where nobody else will be able to take you seriously either.
The reason I lead from guitar is because it covers all that. Keyboard, you're wide open, man.
Well, and I wasn't leading from any instrument, so microphone. Yeah, that was a fun day. So I think we ultimately told our social media guy at the time, it's like, hey, if you could just take that service down, that would be great. Because I really don't want to keep watching that back for the next, X amount of years. Yep, it was bad. All right. Nice. All right. That's what I'm going to ask people to throw in the post. All right. So anybody that's watching, anybody that's in the chat, I would love to hear about the funniest thing that's ever happened to you or the most awkward experience you've had on a Sunday morning. Like, I haven't heard any stories like, a fight breaking out or something like that in the congregation on a Sunday morning. Although I do have one more. And this is like our little intermission just for funsies here, is that I think it was, I don't even remember what church it was, but there was an offering plate that was getting passed around. And we totally found a ticket stub in the offering plate for guess what movie? Oh, no. It was 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, no.
This somehow ended in the offering plate. I'm sure somebody just pulled it out of their pocket, some ones or something like that and threw it in there.
I like to think that was their version of confession.
Listen, it's good for all of us, all right? The church is for all people.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
Man.
Well, hey, as part of our little intermission here, we've got one more thing to talk about. But I do want to tag anybody that's watching on here to check out our website, and I'm going to share that with you right now. And if you want to be part of these conversations, that we can do this with one another in person, which is a lot more fun than even just watching online. I'd love for you guys to actually sign up for our next Kingdom Calibrate event. So if you go over here, hopefully you all see this right now. Tyler, if it's not showing up, you let me know.
I see it.
Perfect. Hey, if you go to kingdomcalibrate.com, this is our website. All you have to do is scroll down right here. Boom. Worship Leader Brunch, Saturday, March 18th, 11 o'clock in Centerville. All you have to do is click on this RSVP right here. It'll take you to this page. And boom, you can fill out your information. You can add 4 additional guests. And you can add more people in that. You just need, you can only do 1 sign up per 4 people. So if you want to bring 10 people on your team, you can do that. All right. But all you need to do is make sure that everybody signs up for that. So the reason I'd love you there, and I not just love you there, I would love your whole team there, is because when we bring our worship teams together, it's not just our worship leaders, but we bring our whole teams together. We can learn so much from one another, and we can actually share these stories in person. And that might be one of our talking points at this next one is, share your most embarrassing worship leader story, and we'll share them all together. And that would be a great place to begin. But the food is free. I want there to be no roadblocks to you guys coming. All you have to do is show up. There's free food, free coffee. Your lunch is covered by us because we find value in just bringing people together and finding some community, because, one of our slogans is you should never do ministry alone. You want to be doing that with other people, and we can be there to support one another. So on that very smooth sponsoring note by my own company, we're going to go into recruiting. So this is another really hard piece for worship teams, is how do I get people onto my team when we don't have enough people? So this kind of ties back to that very first anonymous question we had is, if burnout results from a lack of volunteers, or vice versa, if a lack of volunteers results in burnout, how do we actually start to bring people onto our team? So Tyler, give me a little bit of what you've experienced with that. Maybe what's worked, what hasn't worked. Maybe you still haven't figured out what works, which is a valid answer as well.
I'm open to learning from you all. When I first started, my strategy was let people come to me, which is not a great strategy. If you really want to see team growth. What it did ensure is that the people who, wanted to serve really wanted to serve. But I think we've been having conversations on our team, has that created this wall between your average congregant and your worship team, where they think, oh, they must be really talented. Like there's no way for me to break beyond that wall and serve if I'm not that good. And so we're actually strategizing right now about other ways we could do that. One of the things I'm encouraging my team with is for them to just be honest about their experience on the worship team with people they talk to in the church. For example, if somebody comes up after service and says, hey, that was a really great service. God met me. I'm encouraging some of my key leaders to just be honest, like, yeah, it didn't go perfect, and I'm not the phenomenal musician, but it's a great, team to be a part of, and it's fun to serve God in this way. And we're always looking for new people. So like using my team to be an open door for other people. And that kind of ties back in with, hey, maybe we don't have a position that you fit in perfectly, but we will find a position for you if being a part of our worship ministry is something that you feel called to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good, man. Those are good points. Kicking my 2 cents on this, I think that a lot of times we rely on either making announcements to try to recruit, which, by the way, is that's a losing strategy from the get-go. Announcements don't work, right? To a lot of degrees. And I would say that kind of is a blanket statement across the church to some degree, that, there's nothing better than actually tapping people on the shoulder and inviting people personally to things, whether it's, events we have going on at the church or really anything we want to do. Announcements don't work great from the platform. But what does work really well, I found, is just being present out in, the lobby in between services, before services, after services, and getting as much of your team out there to talk to as many people as possible. Because, usually what I've found is that we start to grow when we start to have conversations, and somebody will come up to you after service. Hey guys, that was great. I've got my brother's here today, and he plays, blah, blah, blah. He plays drums or he plays guitar, oh, that's great. I'd love to meet him. Let's go over here and talk to him real quick. And you start making these really organic connections with people. And, in the last, probably, I will say the last 15 years, I've had about 0 success recruiting people onto my team by throwing stuff out on Facebook, by trying to, do ads on Craigslist. Like most of that stuff just doesn't work. And really, those aren't the people that I need on my team anyways, because they're not really bought into the culture and vision of the church in the first place. They're kind of just, it's like guests coming in from the outside to fill in spots, and that can work temporarily, but it's not going to do a whole lot for your long-term culture of your team.
Right.
So, one of the blessings that we have right now is we don't have a green room, right? So, if you guys are unfamiliar, the green room's that place where it's like, it's like the band waiting room before and after services, where the band can kind of, usually got like some tea and stuff set up. And, if you need to go get a throat lozenge, that's where you go back there. It's just a little hangout area for the band. And there's a piece of it that I love having a little space. And, I have loved having a space like that, but we don't have one right now at the church I'm serving at. And that's been a huge blessing, to be honest with you, because what it does, it forces us to kind of get out of our bubble a little bit and go out and actually talk to people and engage with people. And to me, that does a couple different things. It tears down the wall between the intimidation factor of the people that are on the worship team. And it makes sure that nobody looks at them with like a weird sense of ego or anything like that. And it lets our worship team not have a weird sense of ego about ourselves.
Right.
We should be just out there hanging out with everybody between services. We're just congregants. We're part of the church, just like everybody else is. And I don't love the idea, even though we've done this for a few years, just out of habit, the idea where the band kind of disappears and after service, everybody disappears to the green room. They all kind of show up again at the end of service and they disappear again. And nobody ever really talks to anybody. There's no congregational involvement there. And one of the churches that I really appreciated, which was a big church down in Florence that we visited a couple years ago down in Kentucky, big, large church. I don't know how many people, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people that were probably there on a Sunday morning. And the band did a couple things that I thought was absolutely amazing to help tear down that wall. They were up there praying before service started as a team, right in the front of the worship center. So like in front of the chairs, underneath the platform, they were just all there praying together, right in the middle of right in the congregation space, right? Which I love, because when you're walking in as a congregant and you're seeing the worship team sitting there praying for what's about to happen, that right there is a wall breaking moment, right? It tears down that wall of division between the worship team and the congregation. And, that's kind of relationship I want to see between, worship bands and churches. And like I said, man, I don't want to say anything bad about green rooms. I love green rooms, but sometimes we can use that as a crutch to just disappear so we don't ever have to talk to anybody.
It's easy to hide. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and then we wonder why we can't find anybody, because we're not talking. We have no connection with any of our congregation, right? We're leading them in worship, but we don't really know who we're leading.
Yeah. So I had a team member bring this kind of concept up as a question in a team gathering a couple weeks ago. Said, I wonder if people feel like we're a clique. That's kind of the way he phrased it. And I've been thinking about that, and I can see why people might think that. I mean, we finished band run through, an hour, 40 minutes before service, and we all know each other on the worship team. So we're standing around in little pockets talking to ourselves. We don't realize a half hour goes by. People start to walk in the church, and we're still there talking to one another because we've got all these strong worship team connections. And it's less that we're trying to be a clique and not let others in. It's more just we're not being intentional about integrating with the rest of the body before the service. And that's something I'm trying to encourage my team to do is, yeah, we can have all those conversations and, be in our little huddles before the service. But as soon as those doors open and people start to come in, let's go be ministering to them before the service even starts.
Yeah, I love the word you use, intentional. That's the best word ever for that, because when we become accidentally cliquish, like that's the thing. It's usually an accident. It's not by design. It's just, we're not being intentional with what we're doing, and we don't realize what that communicates to others. So, I like usually when I accidentally do things that are, I'll say, offensive to other people on my team, or maybe as a ministry leader, usually that comes from, it's usually an accident, but it comes from a lack of intentionality in those moments. So if we intentionally figure out, how to be with our congregation, I think that goes a long way. Elliot threw on here, he says, hey, over at his church, we're doing in between services feast, and we temporarily did away with volunteer breakfast in the green room. This has forced us to be present to our congregation. And that's exactly right. Right. It's like, those little green room conversations, are amazing. We used to do a lot of discipleship stuff in there where we'd have devotions, and that gives us a little bit of time for us just as a team. And sometimes that's important. It's good to have those spaces, but it can be as much of a detriment if we're not intentional with what we do with that as it can be a help.
Totally agree.
All right, man.
Something I'm working on.
Yeah. So any closing thoughts before we end this sucker for today?
You just mentioned earlier, don't do ministry alone. And I think that's so key for any leader who feels like either your team's burnt out and you don't know how to fix it, or you're struggling with recruiting. I break out of my ruts when I just talk to other people about my issues and how things are going. I break out of my ruts when I get creative insight from people like Elliot and Dusty. And so find another person, whether in your church or out of it, who kind of knows what you're going through, and just get another perspective on your team and how you can best serve them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll throw a little plug for something that is getting ready to be created as we start, moving into our podcast season here at Kingdom Calibrate, which is coming right around the corner. Something else I'm really excited about that we're going to be starting is what we're calling the worship leader cohort. So the worship leader cohort is, it's basically kind of capped off at about 10 to 12 people. So just like Jesus has disciples around him, I think 12 people is about the maximum amount where everybody feels like they have a voice in it, but it doesn't get too big. And we're going to do a couple of these different groups, and we'll keep adding groups as we go. But the point of these co-ops is for us to be, or not co-ops, cohorts, let me say. My wife corrected me on that the other day. Said those two words do not mean the same thing. The point of the worship leader cohort is for us to learn from one another. So like, hey, if you've been a worship leader for a long time, and you're just ready to be in a group where you can get some accountability, where we can have some discipleship with one another and learn from one another, glean some wisdom from one another, and just be able to pray with one another. Because sometimes we don't even need the information, right? These sessions are great for information, but sometimes all we really need is somebody who can just say, hey, I know what you're going through. Maybe I've been there, maybe I haven't, but I'm willing to pray with you and be a prayer partner as you move forward in your church. And I need some encouragement as I move forward in my church. And to me, that's, the whole idea of Kingdom Calibrate is this kingdom mentality where we are here for one another, where, it's not about us isolating ourselves in whatever church we serve in. We want to create this movement, right? And the movement starts with discipleship. It starts with accountability, and it starts with all of us being able to learn from one another. So if you have any interest in that at all, or it's like, hey, I have a desperate need for that in my life, we're going to be doing that over Zoom and conversations just like this, where we may not be able to meet in person, but we can certainly meet virtually once a week together. And we'll do that pretty intensively for somewhere between 3 and 6 months, depending on what we all want to get out of it. So that will be coming up down the road. If you'd be interested, man, shoot me an email at dusty@kingdomcalibrate.com, or just, go to kingdomcalibrate.com and you can send a message through the website as well. And I'd love to get you on the list for that and give you some dates when we get ready to start those things up.
Sweet.
All right. So I think that's all we've got for today. So we'll be live next Wednesday, 2:00, same time, same place. And aside from that, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you, Tyler, for jumping on again without the echo this time, 2.0. And
Thanks,
we'll see y'all next week. All right.
See you guys.